Don't bother sending a tech, I'll be dead by then. So my story starts on what was a normal day taking calls on the front line for a large cable company. The job pays well, and for the most part the people I deal with are fairly nice to talk to. Quite often we'll get calls from seniors, especially in the morning, who have premise equipment issues such as snow on screen or no signal on their TV sets connected to our digital equipment. Now my heart does go out to some of these folk, because up until recently, past few years, we would supply straight analog cable to many homes, coax direct from wall to TV with scrolling guide. However, most cities we service nowadays require our digital equipment to receive channels, and this has caused a lot of frustration with older people who don't know how to operate said equipment, always having your TV set on video or HDMI to get picture. So oftentimes we get customers who are repeat offenders with long ticket histories of these types of issues. So anyway, I get a call from an older gentleman who's quite bitter and mean right off the bat, doesn't like that I asked for his address, telephone number to verify the account, hates that he has to speak with a machine before reaching an agent, etc. I have some experience handling these types of customers, however this call was going to be a little different. I spent over 45 minutes with this guy, we'll call him Mr. Smith, trying to get his TV set connected to the digital box properly so he could receive a picture. No luck. He was getting clearly frustrated by the whole ordeal and started blaming me for not being able to do my job properly, how I was useless, etc. whatever. Like I said, I've dealt with this before, so I tried my best not to take it personally, but eventually I had to ask him if we could book a service tech to the home, a courtesy call, to get his TV working correctly. Unfortunately, our booking calendar was showing an appointment 3 days out. That's when he dropped this on me: don't bother sending a goddamn technician, because I'll be dead by then. I'm 94 and TV is the only thing I have left, are you really going to make me wait for a tech? I instantly felt bad. I mean, I've heard every complaint in the book as to why people don't want to wait for a tech, but this one kind of got to me. I'm in my mid-20s, so honestly I can't even imagine how it must feel to utter those words. So I spoke with my supervisor, who said they'd see if we could get someone out earlier. But we couldn't promise anything. So I let Mr. Smith know, and he was predictably not very happy with my answer. At that point it almost sounded like he started to cry and went into how he has no family left, and no friends that come visit. This was after I asked if there was anyone in his building that might be able to help. Man, I felt terrible, so I took it upon myself to ask Mr. Smith if I could pay a visit. He lived in a small city over from where I was, not very far to drive. He was a little shocked I was willing to do this, but sounded thankful I was willing to come out and help him personally. So I head over, get to the residence and meet him. Within 30 seconds I had the cable running again, simple input change, and even brought him a simplified remote for his set-top box to avoid this problem in the future. That's when he started crying. He goes into how he hasn't actually spoken or really interacted with anyone for years. He gave me a hug and told me how thankful he was that I came out and helped him, and told me how sorry he was for being so mean earlier on. I said it was no problem and I was happy to help, and that was it. I left. 3 weeks later, my supervisor comes to my desk and asks me if I could come speak with her for a bit about an account for Mr. Smith. Turns out, he sent the cable company a letter outlining how thankful he was for helping him with his issue and how it really made an old man happy again for once in a very long time. The letter was framed and put on our front entrance to retail. I guess the moral of this story is no matter how nasty someone is to you over the phone, sometimes they're not always a terrible person and just going through a lot. I still think about Mr. Smith occasionally when I get those nasty customers, and it makes me feel a little better. Anyway, thanks for reading. Just thought I'd share how this one call changed my outlook on life. Smile. Story 2. As the world turns, what is a day? Years ago I faced a problem similar to what's described here by David Adams, author. I was asked to create a report that would indicate if a task was late or not. Based upon priority, tasks had to be completed within a certain number of days. At first this was straightforward. Business days were the only thing that mattered. I excluded company holidays. They didn't count. I excluded weekends. They didn't count either. However, the concept of business days didn't consider that tasks could arrive at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The actors were on call too at times, so handling work related to the tasks also could occur 24/7. Now let's do some basic math. Let's say a task is assigned at 8 a.m. and is finished at 3 p.m. the same day. How many days have passed? My patron told me 1 day. What if it was assigned at 8 a.m. and finished at 3 p.m. the next day? My patron says 2 days. How about assigned at 11 p.m. and finished at 3 a.m. the next day, so only 4 calendar hours have passed? Or even where an actor is assigned a task on a Saturday morning and completes it on Sunday evening. Would that be 0 days, since neither of those are business days? My patron considers this and concludes we have to push the start time to 12:01 a.m. of the first business day after the task was assigned. Okie dokie. Now we have a simple formula. Clock starts at 12:01 a.m. on the first business day after the day the task was assigned. Clock ends at 11:59 p.m. the day the task was completed. If the day of completion is not a business day, the task ended on the last business day before the day of completion. If a task is completed in the same calculated within 24 hours of the start date/time, that is one day. Beyond that, just count the business days. This was fairly straightforward to set up and validate. Mostly. I do remember there was a discussion around what happens if the task is completed before the official clock begins. Is the day count 0? Should the eager beavers be rewarded? Or wouldn't that confuse leadership? However, we merged with another company that had an international presence. So now the relevant group had a lot of users in other countries. This introduced a lot of variation that I never truly solved. Each country had their own national holidays. When a day began and ended depended upon the rotation of the Earth. So now a day depends upon the user's country. In theory, this was somewhat easy to account for. Each user had a home location, which included the country. Just use that and add the relevant days to a holiday table which maps to the actor's home country. However, the actors performing the tasks could be in one country, and the consumers who received the outputs could be in another. Which perception of a day mattered here? My patron again simply stepped in. He concluded that the actor's perception mattered. He was darn helpful with these decisions. Okie dokie. At times there was collaboration between users. In some cases the task would begin in one country, but end in another. Which day mattered here? My patron, after some thought, decided that we would have to switch to the consumer's perception of a day. Great. But which consumers? In many cases they were located in multiple countries too. After some more thought, my patron elected to return to the actor's perception, but retain the concept of a day aligned with the very first actor assigned to the task. This final arrangement prompted some consternation. There were protests from some actors. In some cases a task was reassigned cross-country so that the concept of a day meant the task would be late, through no fault of the person who it was reassigned to. That didn't seem fair. Some countries had a generous holiday, work hours, and leave policy. This meant that in terms of sheer calendar days, people in some countries could take longer on their tasks and still have them be on time. That didn't seem fair either. Finally, the consumers in some countries grew frustrated at how actors in other countries were more often late with their tasks. But they weren't late, at least not according to the metrics. How does that make sense? As time passed, see what I did there, I gradually moved away from working on this stuff. One of the last things I did was an analysis of cross-country collaboration and consumption. I concluded that more than 80% of the time the relevant tasks were primarily acted upon and consumed in the same country. So, most of the time this was a non-issue. When I last talked with my patron he consoled himself with that analysis. He decided that the gripes would never end no matter what he did, so we might as well stick with this arrangement. He kept the definitions as is. I left as some new on-call policies were rolled out that called the definitions once again into question. I learned that some of continental Europe's worker protections were a lot stronger than in the US. Apparently you cannot simply modify someone's role to surprise. Be on call like you can in the US. Conversations were just starting on how to revise them and I never did learn what the result was.